Hello everyone, Monday morning, March 9th, 2015, and as you can see the snow is finally starting to melt, and I'm out walking the big guy and taking this treacherous path here. I could probably walk out on the road. I'll spare Cecil the residual road salt, and if yesterday morning was felt like summer relatively, this feels like an absolutely blazing hot day. I would guess in the low to mid 40s. Don't even have to really zip my jacket up. Certainly not wear gloves or hat. And that is such a relief. Still the nasty stuff is on the ground, but with a day or two like this, it should all melt away pretty quickly. I'm running pretty late for work, but you know, if it weren't daylight savings, it'd be 7:30 a.m. and I'd be just fine. But body does what it does, especially when you got a kid. And let's see, the things I want to talk about today. Well, yesterday I talked about how loving PowerPoint was possible, and you just had to condition your mind, trick yourself, zero in on the love-worthy bits, which is creating those standalone single images that communicate hyper effectively, which is behind the infographic movement. And here's my dog taking his morning roll in the sand. I'll have to Google what that's all about. I think it has to do with predators and scent and all that. So as I was making the Pipulate presentation, I realize and see that one of the things I want to diagram is really my audience in a meaningful way that I haven't really thought through yet before, who they are, what they're about. And that'll probably be the Venn diagram. And it was easy to draw the first two circles on the Venn diagram, which was those people who want to reach more audience or help their clients reach more audience. That's the SEO and social media crowd. And then there's those people who are aspiring to be a little bit more technical or learn some programming. And that's it, you know, increase their actual hardware and software capabilities in their life, turn themselves a little bit more into makers to jump on the do-it-yourself bandwagons. And those two circles were pretty easy to draw. Now there's this third circle that I kept drawing and eliminating because it sounded like the second circle. I was putting things like people who want to use tiny virtual machines like Linux, or people who want to use Raspberry Pis, or people who want to avoid spending the big bucks on tools or hardware. So this third circle is turning out to be those who are trying to avoid spending lots of money on either large hardware or expensive services. I don't know how to most elegantly state it, but that makes the three circles your SEO and social media crowd who want to build audience, your aspiring technical or programming learners, and those people who want to not spend a lot of money. And that encompasses now how I want to promote GIMP and Inkscape, the Illustrator and Photoshop of the free and open source world, respectively, maybe even Blender. But it also fits into, you know, kicking the tires of running a server using Linux virtual machine on your desktop. And it also covers, what else does it cover? Oh yeah, of course, the Raspberry Pi, using very inexpensive, lightweight hardware, even over a cloud server, which is always an option. You know, I'm not going to talk people out of the elastic computing cloud from Amazon, especially since they have that free tier that uses the scraps of available cycles to make virtual machines. It's a good way to get started, but you do have to give it your credit card. There's low levels of availability. There will be, you know, higher latency than your own dedicated piece of hardware, but it will be there. But after that year, it'll start charging you whatever, you know, to whatever level that virtual machine is. It might end up being $5 or $10 a month. But even at, you know, $10 a month, 10, 20, 30, in 3.5 months, you'll have spent the same amount of money you would have spent for a dedicated server giving you the same, you know, processing power. And you're like, oh, the same processing power from a Raspberry Pi is from an Amazon virtual server? Well, yeah, because virtual servers can be scaled up and down to different levels, and the entry-level one from Amazon is quite weak. You're like, oh, well, Raspberry Pi, they're such weak pieces of hardware. Well, not anymore, for starters. And a lot of companies are switching over to similar-based servers, ARM-based servers. You're like, oh, well, data centers, they're cloud machines. They're not real hardware. Well, of course they're real hardware. And there's two approaches to real hardware. You can use massive core expensive chips like Iridium. There were this whole branch of them from Intel that were essentially the server class versions of the processors we know, like the i5s and the i7s, but spec'd for servers. And they're expensive and they run hot. Or you can use ARM designs, which could be massively multi-core. Every ARM CPU is sort of custom, since the people who make them are not buying the hardware from ARM like people buying hardware from Intel. They're just licensing designs and oftentimes integrating their own hardware. And so you can have servers based on ARM processors just like Intel, but they run cooler. RISC processors take less power, which is why when you're not using your phone, it consumes less power than when you're not using your computer. Computers go into this hibernate mode, you'll notice, to save power. Laptops, for example. But phones don't have to do that. They just stay on all the time. And, you know, relatively speaking, you know, considering the size of the batteries involved, phones just last a lot longer than laptops in continuous turned on non-hibernated use. And one of the reasons for that is that ARM processors take less power, and that is a big advantage in your servers because it will cost you less money to run. It will be easier to do heat dissipation and, you know, a host of other things. They're probably just cheaper processors to boot, so cheaper to set up. And who does this? Well, Baidu is known for doing this. The Google of China has switched over to ARM-based servers. And they're one of the few actual viable competitors to Google on the planet. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But back to the original point, the third circle of the Venn diagram is for people who don't want to spend the big bucks on either their hardware or their software services. So I've got my third circle, and I've got one of the perfect slides to open the Pipulate presentation with. Are you a social media or SEO professional or aspiring professional trying to break in? Are you trying to save money on your tools and services? And finally, are you willing, or do you want to become a little bit more technical in nature, maybe doing a little bit of your own programming, taking some of those skills that in the past you would put into creating Microsoft Excel macros, deadly stuff here, and instead put them into just learning a language that's going to be around forever and is ultimately much more powerful than Excel macros. Ooh, you know what? I am not going to walk this way. Melting ice sometimes means black ice. And it doesn't even look like the compressed down areas are going to be safe this morning. So I'm changing my direction. And that is a good stopping point before you see me fall and land on my butt. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon. And don't forget to go to pipulate.com and check out my Google Slides presentation. And subscribe.